Thank you. Now, we're thrilled to have Claire Field here for our opening session this morning. For those of you who have not heard Claire previously, we are in for a treat as she brings a wealth of experience through working in senior positions in a variety of educational institutions, including TAFE New South Wales, a national not-for-profit vet provider, as well as senior positions in state and government agencies. She has also served as the CEO of the Australian Council for Private Education and Training. Claire is a board member of MEGT and the Australian EdTech Industry Hub, EduGrowth, as well as being a member of the Australian Government's Pacific Australian Labour Mobility Advisory Group. Claire is currently the principal of Claire Field and Associates, a consultancy and advisory practice offering strategic advice on international education, vet, and private higher education to providers, government and other education stakeholders. Following today, I'm sure many of you will want to subscribe to her podcast called What Now, What Next? Claire is an internationally sought after speaker, and unfortunately, being an internationally sought after speaker means flight delays, and Claire has had quite the journey to be with us this morning. On Saturday, she was in London. She's had 2 flights cancelled, and if she... It did work out in the end, but she arrived very late last night, is extremely jet lagged, and I'm actually giving you credit to fall asleep later. So she's worked miracles to be here this morning. We're very thrilled to welcome Claire Field to open this morning. So thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, Tammy. Thank you for the welcome. And Chris, if there is an RPL for behind-the-scenes logistics, you absolutely deserve it over the weekend. It's been terrific and, again, lovely to be here, and thank you very much. I have quite a bit to rattle through with you, but you're very welcome if you find this useful. The slides will be available, and so, you know, if there is something that you're particularly interested in, obviously take a photo, but otherwise happy to share these with you. So I wanted to focus on 3 types of change when we're thinking about preparing young people for the future. There are the changes, and yes, they are constant, hence my grey hair. The changes that happen in our sector, and there are more underway which are quite important. The changing skill needs in the economy, and then, as Chris mentioned, the technology that is changing, learning and assessment, and I think all of those are pretty important to have our heads around. So let's start here in the fabulous state of New South Wales, and the Minister announced just a couple of weeks ago a review of the New South Wales vet system. There are now details available on the Department of Education website. It will have 3 phases. The first is basically the research and literature, the second is consultations, and the third is advice to government, from which they will develop a New South Wales skills plan. Understandably, TAFE New South Wales and its funding and resourcing is a key part of that, but when the Minister spoke to launch the review, he talked about the importance of the different providers involved in education, from schools all the way through to universities. So no doubt important for those of you in the vet and schools sector to be across it, and I'm sure government will be keen to seek your views. Dr. Michelle Bruniges, former Secretary in the Department of Education, both here in New South Wales and in the Commonwealth, will head up the panel. And Professor Verity Firth, who many of you will remember as a former minister, is also a part of the panel undertaking that review. And at the same time, New South Wales is still in negotiations with the other states and the Australian government on what's known as the National Skills Agreement. And that's a 5-year, like we have those funding agreements for the healthcare and hospitals. This is for the vet system, and we've had them for a very long time. This one is taking quite a while to finalise. I had expected that when there was a change of government last year, it it would be much easier for the states to agree with what the Commonwealth might want for the extra money that they get, but the negotiations are still going on. Fee-free TAFE, understandably, given the Australian government's election commitments, will be a key part of that agreement. The commitment from both the Commonwealth and New South Wales governments that at least 70% of their funding will go to TAFE. Now, currently in New South Wales, TAFE New South Wales gets more than that, but what that means in terms of negotiating the next agreement is yet for us to see those details, but something to keep in mind for those of you that receive government funding for the vet that you deliver is that the Commonwealth is trying to agree with the states on what they're describing as a shared stewardship model. And reading between the lines, when I looked at the transcripts of a recent Senate estimates hearing, I would describe that as more nationally consistent funding, right? So at the moment, there's about a $10,000 a year difference between what the West Australian government funds for a diploma of nursing, by example, versus what Queensland gives for the same course delivered in the capital cities of both states. So there's a view that I think reasonably, is this the best way for real priority courses for us to just leave it with the states? Clearly Canberra doesn't think so. I'm suspecting, having sat around that table many years ago, that the states probably have their own view. So this is up in the air, but it could change the levels of funding for particular courses. So keep an eye out for that. Many of you will be aware that there's been a big change in the industry advisory arrangements nationally. We've moved from skills service organisations and pilot skills organisations to jobs and skills councils. I saw Skills IQ are here today. They've stepped back from their role as a skills service organisation and now are providing contracted support and working on behalf of two of the new Jobs and Skills Councils. So even where there is some change happening, some of those key agencies stay on and continue to make a contribution, albeit in a slightly different way. What's most important, I think, rather than who's running which and what labels and names have they got, the names have changed, is that these Jobs and Skills Councils will have an expanded set of responsibilities. In the past, they've typically been quite narrowly focused on training packages, what goes in each training package. They're still doing that, but they're also going to have a broader remit focused on workforce planning, right? Trying to help work out what are the workforce needs into the future of particular industries, working with RTOs on training delivery and career pathways, and industry stewardship, trying to better connect industry and the vet sector and bring that information together. Now, there is also an opportunity for you to have input, and I do apologise for that was a photo of the Jobs and Skills Australia's work plan. At the time that I took it, they didn't have a nice printed copy available. They do now, that's on their website. They are a new agency set up to advise the government and the rest of us nationally on a range of jobs and skills issues. They are seeking feedback on their work plan. What are they going to focus on? What are the right industries? And again, you might want to have a look on their website for whether you want to make any input to their thinking for what they'll be working on next year. Quite critically, although stalled, I think, at the bit at the moment, critically for you, are changes to the design of vet qualifications. Right, we've got a plethora of them and they are incredibly prescriptive. I was in Germany a few months ago. What it takes in terms of actually written numbers of pages to describe the work that people training for the hospitality sector need, any occupations that the Germans train, takes them 66 pages to write down, right, for all of the occupations in the hospitality sector. In our tourism and, so yes, two industry areas, tourism and hospitality, it's over 2,000 pages. Right? No wonder we find it all really difficult. So the Commonwealth Government and states are across this and want to be less prescriptive, and that's what they're working towards. So there would be more opportunity for you to have input into the design of what you're teaching. It's less about 5 of these and 2 of those. But I think with that's going to come some challenges for the sector. Potentially opens up the opportunity for providers to cut corners. Not in the vet and schools area, but some parts of the sector. So I think this is going to be tricky to land, but I think it's pretty important, so watch this space. In terms of skills for the future and what are the priority skills, this is my analysis of what was agreed last year between the Commonwealth and each state and territory in their 1-year funding agreement, right? They couldn't land the big 5-year agreement, so they focused on 1 year. And what I've done is looked at how many millions of dollars, how many places, what were the top 3 fields in each state and territory where the funding was agreed to go, and then obviously how much per enrolment. Now, New South Wales is quite different than the other states, and that's because the former New South Wales government was keen to fund partial qualifications, skill sets or priority units, as well as full qualifications. So you can see it's got many more places. And it's obviously paying less per place. But most critical for you in thinking about what are the skills for the future, at least from government's perspectives, it's definitely the care sector, it's definitely the tech sector, and then it differs a little. I've called it green skills, agriculture, sovereign capability, though manufacturing important in some states and territories. If you haven't seen it yet, there's another source, rather than Claire's annual wrap-up of what's been agreed, there's another source of information for you, and that's on the Jobs and Skills Australia website. They have something called NERO, which I can't remember, feeling a little bit jet-lagged, exactly what the NERO stands for, N-E-R-O. It is detailed at the regional level and updated monthly skills forecasts for what are the jobs and how are they changing at a regional level. So something to be thinking about as you're planning. What I was impressed by, and if you're interested, there's an Excel spreadsheet that sits underneath this with even further granular detail, is that the Singapore government are very explicit in terms of them thinking about the future and what kind of changing skill needs they have, and in making that information publicly available. And again, they've focused on green economy, care economy, and the digital economy. And you can see some of the particular areas that for them they're focused on, and as I said, there's some further detail underneath that, particular subjects and topics that they're focusing their vet sector on. And again, if you want, I can make through Chris or Fred access to that Excel spreadsheet available to you if that's of interest. But it is going to be, I think, where this 5-year funding agreement lands. I think it's going to be where the new New South Wales Skills Plan lands. We are going to be looking at more focus on digital skills, more focused on skills for those working in the care economy, and I'm talking broadly, from early childhood right through to aged care, of course the disability sector, and healthcare within that as well. And then I think we're going to see a continuing emphasis on skills for a greener economy, and we'll wait and see what that looks like. Again, it's something that Jobs and Skills Australia are looking at. So that's as much as I can tell you about skills for the future at this stage. But I wanted to also talk about technology. EdTech is something that I think we need to be mindful of, and I know that you are in many ways, both how it is changing teaching, but also how it's changing assessment. And Chris is right. 12 months ago, we wouldn't have been talking about generative AI in the form of ChatGPT, but we probably should have been talking about personalised learning and assessment and the role that artificial intelligence plays in that. And immersive learning. I think there's a lot of gimmickry around virtual reality and augmented reality, and will we all wander around wearing goggles in 5 years' time and, only exist in a virtual space? Probably not. But I do think there's some thinking there about the ways that people learn and the impact of that. So I'll talk through that as well. My T has disappeared. That's very interesting. The T should be up by the P. ChatGPT, I first heard about it on the 1st of December. I was looking through my Twitter thread and someone in the tech sector in the UK who I follow, this man, Danny Richmond, posted something that I actually found hard to get my head around. He said, I mentor a young lad with poor literacy skills who's starting a landscaping business, and he struggles to communicate with his clients in a professional manner. So he set up something using GPT-3, and I thought, what's that? With Gmail for this young man. I'll blow that up in a second. He said the entire process for him to set this up for this young man took 15 minutes and required no coding. And what it does is Dave types in, Sally, starts work at yours Monday from Dave. And it automatically turns it into very professional. Dear Sally, I hope this email finds you well. Writing to let you know I'm starting work with you on Monday. Really looking forward to it. Any questions, need help with anything, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And my mind was absolutely blown. What mystery and witchcraft is this? What does it mean for teaching foundation skills? Now, I've since been following him. That was back on the 1st of December. And what he's noticed and observed is that Dave's written literacy skills have vastly improved through using, so not only is it giving him a much more professional interaction with his clients, but in actual fact it's also helping to build his literacy skills because he sees what he types in and he sees what he starts to get back. Anyway, since then we've all been in a journey. Oh dear, we have got a funny thing going on with my heading there. It shows up fine on my PowerPoint, sorry about that. So I'm sure by now you're all across what it is, but I think it's important just to not make that assumption entirely. Maybe there's some still grappling with this witchcraft. So what is it? Well, it is a large language model created by analysing billions of sentences of text from the internet. And I just love this quote. Machines that have ingested an internet's worth of data, weighed up the relationships, this is where the algorithm comes in, weighed up the relationships between things and able to generate content that appears original. It doesn't do any thinking. It's like the autocomplete function on your phone. When you open up your phone and you open up your text messages and you type in happy, it's going to suggest to you that the next word you want to use might be birthday, right? That's one of the options, because most often when people type happy, they next want to type birthday. It's just that on a gigantic scale. Right, draws on all those billions of sentences. That's what gets things wrong. That's why it makes up things. It's not deliberately making them up. It's saying, oh, ordinarily when people put these things together, it kind of goes something like this. Whether the something like this is accurate or not is immaterial to it. It's just drawing happy and birthday together at an enormous scale. And of course, it's not the only form of what's known as generative AI. There are also similar kinds of algorithms, and I can't explain all of this to you, I just have been informed on this. I'm not a coding expert, but where you can write in text, and it will create audio for you, it will create videos for you, it will create pictures, simulations, right? This graphic here was generated by someone, not me, typing in, do a nice picture of what is generative AI. And it's created this as a response. And it's a massive challenge to the vet sector, right? It's a challenge in schools and universities at the moment where there's a lot of written assessment and you're trying to work out whether there's cheating going on. But if you step back a bit and think about what it means for going back to those training packages and how detailed they are and how long they take to create, this stuff is moving at scale and pace. And schools, especially, let's start. Universities, it's quite easy to change courses and create new content. Schools, yes, you've got your curriculum and you've got national standards, but they don't take the years and years and years and have all the detailed prescriptions in them that the vet sector does. So in the first number of days to first 1 million and 100 million users, right, of different technology, and see the line going pretty much straight up in the air. It took merely a matter of days for there to be 100 million users of ChatGPT versus some of these other forms of technology taking substantially longer. So it's change, it's being adopted very quickly, and it's profoundly impacting education, but also work, and that's why I think it's critical for VET. What does it mean in terms of assessment? No more just setting written essays, no more PowerPoint presentations. It can do PowerPoint presentations, it can do summaries and proposals. We need more authentic tasks. If there are going to be written assessment tasks, we need to be thinking about students using generative AI as part of developing that text. I would suggest definitely not pencil and paper text. But I think we also need to be really thinking about data privacy and ethical issues, and I'm pleased that the Australian government has 2 reviews underway. One of generative AI and its impact on education, that's being run through a standing committee of the Parliament, and the other, the Science and Industry Minister, Ed Husic, is looking also at generative AI and privacy principles. And then I think when we're thinking about, well, if and how we incorporate it into our teaching and learning, is it going to remain largely free? And if not, what are the equity issues of, yes, I want to shake ears, I'm thinking about this as well. But we can't hide away from it, right? It's not just, oh, OpenAI, this new company, and there's ChatGPT, let's try and close this down, which is partly what the European Union is trying to do, regulate it away. Don't think ultimately that will be that successful. You've got Microsoft, but you've also got Google, and you've also got Facebook or Meta heavily invested in this. And I saw the latest, Harvard University have now built their own for one of their computer science courses, so that it will be developed to help their computer science students, and they intend it will be like a one-to-one tutor for their students. So this technology is not going to go away, and we're going to need to think about it. But again, I want to go back to what does this mean for the vet sector? And it's particularly the business services training package that it has immediate impact on. So this technology came out at the very end of November, and we've set up and we've been planning and we've been teaching business service qualifications and subjects since then, units. And the way that a whole lot of businesses are doing a whole lot of tasks within that training package has already changed, and we haven't yet started to make changes to that training package. There's over 3,000 RTOs which have at least one unit from the business services training package on their scope. So this is something that the sector needs to be grappling with. Not you in this room, but this is the challenge of preparing students for the future. So what I've done on the left-hand side, I haven't written out or copied and pasted every single unit title from the BSB package, but those are the key words from within various units of competency, right? So the training package has a number of units that are around planning and decision making. While there's a whole generative AI available to help you do, not all of them, but key components of that planning and decision making can now be done quite differently. Cost-benefit analysis, SWOT analysis, well, there's an AI tool that you can use for that. What about for writing quality policies and procedures? Not only useful when you're running an RTO and you've got to keep your quality management system up to date, but any business that wants to or has a quality management system, all of those policies and procedures or elements of them are taught in the business services training package, and there's now double DUBBLE, all of these hyperlinks are there if you want to go in and play with them later on. It can automatically, if you're writing your policies and procedures through any kind of platform that's like a Google Doc where it's interactive through the internet, it will you just turn it on, it automatically follows what you do and writes a procedure around them. So again, it's not going to change the fact that we have policies and procedures, but it's already changing how people write them, how they update them, and we're still teaching students about how we used to do that before this technology changed. What about marketing and communication, right? Hugely disruptive by ChatGPT. It can write all your website copy. It can help you do your audience research. It can do a whole lot of data analysis for you. And there's tools and various different options that you can use, and people are using them, right? And again, through the business services training package, the skills that we're teaching are not the skills that are currently being used, right, in the way that people are using ChatGPT technology. I'm nearly finished. I won't bore you all with this, but legal and paralegal services. Now, there's apparently a court case in the US where a lawyer was using ChatGPT and hadn't worked out that it sometimes did make things up, and he was apparently citing legal cases that didn't actually exist. Slight problem there. One does still have to check one's homework, but nonetheless, there's a whole lot. So this comes from Allen and Overy, a big legal firm in the UK. They've been using one of their own, right, developed for them, and it is doing a raft of work that their paralegals used to do. Now, I assume they're checking it before they take it into the courtroom, but again, there's a whole part of the business services training package that is teaching students skills in ways that the legal sector is no longer doing that work. You might have seen that Rolling Stone and BuzzFeed have actually taken the step of replacing some of their journalists, mostly those doing fairly, basic things, the BuzzFeed quizzes, etc. But they don't need people to do that work anymore. They're quite happy using this technology. And when they made these announcements, their share prices went up, and they said they would cut up to 12% of their workforce. And we're still teaching people how to do this work. So I think it's really going to be quite a critical 12 months ahead for the business services training package, because to my mind it's not sustainable to have a means of industry specifying the skills that it needs in a model that takes a number of years to consult and then reach agreement, and then RTOs apply to put the new units or the new qualifications or the updated versions onto their scope, and then they enrol the students, and then we might be 3 years down the track that we're teaching skills that again are no longer relevant. I think this is a real test for VET. I think for the business services training package, that model probably no longer exists. I've written elsewhere and happy to take questions if you're interested. I think there's a different model, but that of course is going to be stress testing the way we design other training packages, right? If we take one and step it outside of the training package environment so we can be future focused, well, what does it mean for the others? But there's a couple of other things I wanted to draw to your attention because I think they're important, and they are about the focus on the future. Personalised learning and assessment is something that I probably first learnt about maybe in 2018, a number of EdTech companies explaining what they were doing, using big data and machine learning to accelerate student learning and improve learning outcomes. It's really like recognition of prior learning in real time. And it's truly competency-based rather than time-based progression. And again, I think that's going to be disruptive. So what happens? This is Century Technology. They're an EdTech company based in the UK. There are a number of others. There's one that's newly established here in Australia. What happens is you're learning online, you do an assessment before you start learning. Right? And it might look like we're all novices, but in actual fact, because of some learning that I did and some learning that Chris did and some learning that Fred did, well, we all have slightly different starting points, although we all look like on paper that we are novices. So based on our answers to that initial assessment, within the broader agreed curriculum, we all have slightly different learning paths. So let's say that starting off out of the gates, I'm slightly got a bit more knowledge about issue X than my two colleagues. So I start off, I don't need to relearn issue X, they do, it's new to them. And we're progressing along and there's various assessments along the way. I started off flying along, but when I get to this particular assessment point, there's something I really don't understand. And the different answers that I give in that assessment task means I get a whole lot of remedial, different ways of teaching me. Oh, it's clear, Claire hasn't understood this particular issue, and it automatically redesigns the next stage of the course. So these two carry on and off they go and finish and graduate before me, but we don't actually know, right? Oh, Claire's a bit hopeless, she really hasn't understood this, right? It automatically redesigns for me, and then once I'm up to speed with it, then my learning path similarly echoes yours. So truly personalised, based on every individual's response. And the data that I've seen is that not only do learners learn more, but they hold on to that knowledge for longer than students through a traditional, whether it's online or face-to-face learning path. So something else for us to be thinking about when we're preparing learners for the future. And the last one that I wanted to talk about is immersive learning. And it sounds like I just hop on planes and I'm never in the country. I had a study tour that I was on where I learnt about the German example and where I learnt about this example. I was in Norway meeting with some EdTech companies over there. Not the one I'm going to show you an example of, but they put up an image that I think really resonated with me. That's why I'm telling you about it, about the power of immersive learning versus other traditional forms of learning. Most of you will be familiar with the US plane that landed in the Hudson River, and there was a Tom Hanks movie about it, Captain Sully. And two things. So they started their presentation with two pictures. One was the picture of Captain Sully in the plane, in the cockpit, and the other was, and you might have this in your mind, all of the passengers out. Remember, they all lined up on the wings of the plane on either side, waiting for the rescue boats to come and rescue them. Captain Sully had never landed a plane on a river before, and in fact most pilots have never landed a plane on a river before. But he'd done hundreds, maybe thousands, of hours of simulated learning about landing in all kinds of different conditions. And he was able to use that learning. It was very applied, and he sat there in these simulators and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, and he was able to land that plane successfully. All of those passengers were like you and I, and had sat on aeroplanes many times before, and all been shown how to put on life jackets. There were 4 people on that plane who put on a life jacket, and only one put it on correctly, right? It's incredibly powerful. They'd all been shown it and demonstrated, and they sat there and right? But it's passive. He had practiced something that he never had a chance to need, and he did it. They'd all sat there, and it hadn't sunk in, right? So I do think there's something about immersive learning, same as when you get your hands on the tools, but we can't all, as technology's changing and the world of work's changing, we can't all give everybody access to the latest and the newest technology, but we probably can in some ways through immersive learning opportunities. And this is one, and it's. I don't have any commercial relationships with any of these websites or anything that I show you. I just hear about these new things and think they're interesting, and so I thought I would show you this.
Welcome to the real world of virtual reality on the zSpace platform. What is zSpace? It's a tabletop virtual reality that's transforming education today, regardless of whether students are learning at school or remotely. zSpace functions as your typical Windows PC until you open a zSpace application, and then the magic really begins. Long story short, zSpace tracks the user's stylus in real time, allowing the user to comfortably reach in, interact, move around, dissect, blow up, or change different variables within the environment.
Now, that's technology that is gaining a great deal of traction in the US. Whether it does or doesn't here is really largely immaterial, and no doubt there are others. But we don't need to all be walking around with funny goggles on our heads to be able to be engaging in immersive learning opportunities. And I shared that video I was very fortunate to be invited to present to the Deans of Science of the universities, and I shared that with them a little while ago, and they sat there and thinking about, well, what does this mean? And we had a great conversation about it, and one of the deans said to me, she said, yes, Claire, but, that doesn't help you prepare for cutting up a rotten fish. That helps you prepare to dissect a perfect fish. And then some of her colleagues went, yeah, but it does help you prepare, right? So it's not to say one is better than doing things in real life, but as the world of work is changing, as we're wanting to give students access to opportunities to test their skills in new environments, I think increasingly virtual or augmented reality is going to be a part of how we do that. And to emphasise the point, Holland IQ is, if you're interested, they have a lot of free data available on their website, and a disclosure, I do provide some information and updates on the Australian sector to them. HollandIQ.com, I think, is their website. And they track a lot of what's happening in EdTech, and looking at where venture capital funding was going, so into new sort of startup businesses. You can see now this is 2023, looking back at calendar year 2022. Where was the venture capital money going? Where was the investment going into new education technologies? Well, a whole lot of it was going into management, right? Better education management systems. There was a lot going into student support, right? We've just come out of COVID-19. How do we provide more mental health and other student support? And there's various technology companies looking at that. And then look at the investment deals that were being done on experiential learning. Right, so there's going to be more models and options available, and presumably coming down at a lower price point. Now, I've surprised myself and finished a bit early. If anyone has a comment or a question before we get to the panel while you're digesting all of that, I'm very happy to take that from you. Otherwise, the lovely Brian Wexham is ready to go with a much more exciting and interesting presentation. That's what he told me. And if you want to get in touch, that QR code will take you to my LinkedIn profile, and I'd be keen to connect on there. No, you're all... Oh, Brian's got a... Well, this will be a difficult one. Mr. Wexham, what can I answer for you?
Given your experience of private providers, do you think they're going to be quicker to adopt A1 on this sort of thing as opposed to TAFE?
No, I think there's some good take-up. It was a number of years ago. Some of the TAFEs have been using virtual reality to help them in subjects like welding, right, where the cost of materials is incredibly prohibitive, and you don't want all those, mostly young men, but let's say young people, misusing all of that welding, I would say goop, I don't really know what one welds with, because it costs a lot when they get it wrong, right? So they invested in the goggles, put the goggles on, kids have a chance to learn, and once they can do these things, you know, nice and neatly, and you know they're not going to waste all your materials, then you let them go with the real thing. Where I think private providers have an edge over TAFE institutes is if the VET system can't crack this issue with keeping the business services and parts of the IT training package up to date. Right, a number of them have already moved into offering non-accredited industry certified courses, particularly in the IT sector. Right, don't wait for the IT training package to be updated. Just offer to your employers on a the employers that you work with on a fee-for-service basis, offer the training that they need, backed by Microsoft or Google or AWS, etc. That's much harder for TAFE institutes while governments have them focused on government-funded training, because government-funded training will obviously be accredited training that comes from training packages. So that's where you can start to see a shift happening. And I guess what I worry about with that is if the VET sector can't work out how to keep particularly those business qualifications and units, but some of the IT ones as well, which is where the tech changes are happening. If it can't keep them updated, well, employers won't bother with VET. They will just, access, whether it's through a university or a VET provider or a non-accredited provider, they'll access the training their workers need. But our students who are looking for full qualifications will potentially be in courses that are teaching them outdated skills. Right? That's the real worry for me. So hopefully all of these reviews, governments will be able to fix it, and we will be able to prepare students for the future. Thank you very much.